There are filmmakers who capture stories. And then there is Martin Scorsese, a man who felt them. Even at 82, after half a century behind the camera, Scorsese admits that the brightest light on a film set was never the spotlight, but the women who stepped into it. And behind every close-up, behind every whisper of dialogue, lived a memory he never truly escaped. Some were muses, some were mirrors, some were storms, but each left a mark that even time, fame, and legacy could not erase. Today, we uncover the 6 actresses Martin Scorsese could never get over, the ones he spoke about in memoirs, interviews, and quiet reflections, the ones who shaped not only his films, but the man himself. Watch until the end. In number 5, he speaks about a woman who is now 92 years old and still active and leading a vibrant life. Number 1. Lorraine Bracco. Before Goodfellas became a masterpiece, before its scenes were studied in film schools and whispered about in Hollywood corridors, Martin Scorsese found something unexpected. A muse who challenged him, softened him, and terrified him with her honesty. Lorraine Bracco wasn't just another actress stepping into the role of Karen Hill. She was a woman who understood emotional truth in a way Scorsese rarely encountered. In interviews years later, Scorsese admitted that Lorraine carried a kind of fearless vulnerability. She wasn't intimidated by him, nor by De Niro, nor by the pressure of portraying a woman swallowed by a world of crime and desire. Instead, she confronted every scene like she was confronting life itself, head-on, unapologetic, and razor-sharp. Bracco once wrote that working with Scorsese was like stepping into a storm, but a storm that knew exactly where it was going. She admired his obsession with detail, but she also pushed back when needed. She famously argued to include more emotional weight in Karen's point of view, and Scorsese listened, really listened, because he sensed she was right, and that changed him. On set, he often found himself watching her even after the camera cut. He later said that Lorraine made the film breathe. She brought humanity into a world built on violence and loyalty. Her scenes didn't just add depth, they revealed something personal inside Scorsese, his fascination with strong women who carried both fire and fragility. Though they never had a romance, their connection was unmistakably intimate. Director and actress bound by mutual respect, artistic electricity, and an emotional truth that lingered long after filming wrapped. Even in his later interviews, when asked why Goodfellas still mattered to him, Scorsese's voice softened. "Because of Lorraine," he said. "She showed me who Karen really was. And maybe who I was too." Number 2. Cathy Moriarty. Long before Martin Scorsese became the elder statesman of cinema, he was a young director fighting for emotional truth. And then came Cathy Moriarty, an 18-year-old with the presence of a seasoned performer and the fearlessness of someone who didn't yet know she was supposed to be afraid. When Scorsese cast Moriarty in Raging Bull, 1980, he was deep in personal turmoil. The film was a risk. De Niro was consumed by the role, and the studio doubted whether an unknown teenager could stand beside him. But Scorsese knew within minutes of seeing her screen test. This girl was Vicky LaMotta. She had a quiet magnetism, a hypnotic stillness that could both soothe and destroy. Years later, Scorsese recalled in interviews that Moriarty had a face the camera fell in love with and a discipline that took my breath away. She never overacted, never chased emotion. She allowed it to simmer. Dangerous, alluring, impossible to look away from. Moriarty wrote in early press notes that Scorsese treated her like a veteran, pushing her to discover power she didn't know she had. But their bond went deeper than technique. In her presence, Scorsese saw the fragility of youth colliding with the brutality of adult life, the very theme Raging Bull depended on. On set, she often disarmed him. She would ask simple, earnest questions. Why does Vicky stay? What does she fear? Questions that forced Scorsese to confront the emotional skeleton of the story. She wasn't shaping just a character, she was shaping the film's soul. Even decades later, Scorsese spoke of her with awe. "Kathy had this truth," he said softly. "I don't think Raging Bull would exist as it does without her. She taught me that silence can be louder than violence." A teenage unknown had changed him, and changed his cinema forever. Number 3. Margot Robbie. By the time Martin Scorsese crossed paths with Margot Robbie on The Wolf of Wall Street, 2013, he had already shaped generations of cinema. But Robbie brought something he hadn't felt in years. A bolt of raw, electrifying energy that reminded him what discovery felt like. She was young, unproven, and auditioning for a role many thought would go to an established star. Yet the moment she walked in, Scorsese sensed the undeniable. She had the spark he'd always chased. During press interviews, Scorsese admitted that Robbie transformed the room. She didn't just read lines, she inhabited the character. Naomi Belfort's glamour, fury, charm, contradictions. Robbie carried all of it with a ferocity that shocked even DiCaprio. Scorsese later laughed, recalling how Robbie's unscripted slap stunned Leonardo so much that he forgot the next line. That was her power. Unpredictable, fearless, magnetic. Robbie later wrote that Scorsese encouraged her to find the danger in every scene, a note she carried into all her future roles. But beneath the advice was something deeper. Scorsese saw in her the same clarity he once saw in Kathy Moriarty, the same fire that lived in Lorraine Bracco, a woman unwilling to shrink herself to fit Hollywood's expectations. On set, he often found himself quietly studying her timing, her instinct, her ability to shift from comedic brilliance to heartbreaking sincerity. Within seconds, Robbie had awakened something dormant inside him, a reminder that cinema still had room for surprise. Years later, Scorsese called her one of the most fearless actresses I've ever met, praising her boldness in interviews across Variety, THR, and his own Tribeca Conversations. She represented what he loved most: reinvention, risk, and the electricity of talent unbound. Margot Robbie didn't just impress him, she re-energized him. She reminded him of the thrill of discovering lightning for the very first time. Number 4. Lily Gladstone. When Martin Scorsese began Killers of the Flower Moon, 2023, he was 80 years old, an age when most filmmakers slow down, soften their ambitions, or retreat from risk. But then came Lily Gladstone, and suddenly, Scorsese found himself feeling something he hadn't felt in decades. Awe. Not the loud, explosive awe of youthful discovery, but the deep, quiet, spiritual awe of recognizing a rare soul the moment she steps into the frame. In multiple interviews, including his conversations with Apple TV+, Hollywood Reporter, and Festival Q&As, Scorsese confessed that Lily's presence changed the entire film. He originally envisioned Killers differently, but once he saw her screen test, he reconstructed the story around her. Lily brought the heart, he said. Without her, it wouldn't be the same film. Gladstone later shared in essays and interviews that Scorsese directed her with a gentleness she didn't expect. He encouraged her stillness, her silences, her emotional precision, never pushing her into theatrics. She wrote that he treated her like a guardian of the story, a responsibility she carried with profound care. On set, Scorsese found himself mesmerized by her ability to express entire worlds with a single shift in her eyes. Unlike the explosive performers he built his career around, Lily's power lived in subtlety. She didn't demand the camera's attention, she invited it, and the camera obeyed. For Scorsese, she represented something sacred, the kind of authenticity he had spent decades searching for. In discussions after the film's release, he admitted that Lily reminded him why he still made movies: to witness truth, to honor humanity, to capture souls on film. At a stage in life when most men reminisce, Lily Gladstone gave him something unexpected. She gave him renewal. Number 5. Ellen Burstyn. When Martin Scorsese cast Ellen Burstyn in Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, 1974, he wasn't yet the legend the world knows today. He was a young, restless filmmaker drowning in ambition and uncertainty, unsure if Hollywood would ever truly understand him. And then came Burstyn, already respected, already powerful, already in full control of her artistic identity. She didn't just join the film, she chose Scorsese, and that choice transformed him. Burstyn had read dozens of scripts before selecting Alice, but it was Scorsese's raw, unpolished intensity that intrigued her. She famously insisted he direct the film after seeing Mean Streets, telling Warner Brothers, "I want that young man." Years later, Scorsese would call those words a gift that saved me. On set, Burstyn pushed him in ways no one else had. She challenged every scene, asked deeper questions about Alice's grief, her desires, her independence. She wrote in her memoir, Lessons in Becoming Myself, that Scorsese didn't direct from above. He directed from the soul, but she also admitted he needed grounding, focus, and emotional clarity. And she wasn't afraid to demand it. Their collaboration was a fusion of force and tenderness. Scorsese admired her discipline and her refusal to compromise the truth of a woman's experience. Burstyn admired his fearlessness and his willingness to let emotion, not ego, lead the story. It was Ellen who taught him how to shape female interiority with respect, nuance, and empathy. She opened his eyes to emotional landscapes he had never fully explored. In later interviews, Scorsese often said that directing Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore made him a better filmmaker and a better man, and Ellen Burstyn was the reason. She was not just a collaborator, she was a compass, one he would carry throughout his life. Number 6. Barbara Hershey. Before the Last Temptation of Christ, 1988, became one of the most controversial films in modern cinema, it was simply a dream. Fragile, years in the making, constantly threatened by studios, investors, and public outrage. And in the center of that fragile dream stood Barbara Hershey, a woman whose quiet devotion to the material shaped Scorsese's understanding of spiritual longing and emotional sacrifice. Scorsese first met Hershey in the early 1970s, when she recommended he read Nikos Kazantzakis' novel. Few people know this, but Hershey was the first to place the book in his hands, planting a seed that would haunt him for over a decade. He later said in interviews that if she hadn't introduced him to the story, the film might never have existed. When they finally reunited to make the movie, Hershey's presence was transformative. Playing Mary Magdalene wasn't simply an acting job for her, it was a calling. She approached the role with a level of emotional surrender that shook Scorsese. In interviews with Criterion and in published reflections, he described her performance as a soul laid bare. Hershey wrote that Scorsese directed her with a tenderness she'd never experienced before, a kind of quiet protectiveness, as if he knew they were handling sacred material. She admired his courage, his vulnerability, and his willingness to confront faith, shame, desire, and redemption head-on. On set, Scorsese often watched her in silence, moved by her ability to convey centuries of pain and yearning in the smallest gestures. There was a stillness in her, a spiritual weight, that deepened the entire film. Barbara Hershey didn't just influence a role, she influenced a director's relationship with faith, guilt, humanity, and the fragile line between sin and salvation. In her, Scorsese found a muse of the soul, a woman who helped him confront the deepest corners of himself. In the end, Martin Scorsese's legacy isn't etched only in his films. It lives in the women who challenged him, comforted him, and revealed the hidden corners of his own humanity. From Lorraine Bracco's fierce honesty to Barbara Hershey's spiritual fire, each left a mark no award could ever rival. Even at 82, Scorsese admits his greatest inspirations were never the lights or lenses, but the souls who stood before them. Which of these 6 actresses do you believe shaped him the most? Let us know in the comments, and if you love these Hollywood stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to keep legendary archives growing.